Hey guys, Budcat7 here. Okay, it is Friday, November 6th, 2020, and I'd like to thank you for visiting the Stonewall Research Channel here on YouTube. I really do appreciate it. Alright, guys, well, in this video, we are going to take a look at the Iroquois Great Law of Peace and the Great Peacemaker, who was some figure in the ancient past that gave rise to the Iroquois nation, which is really a confederacy of 5 tribes and then later a 6th tribe during the 1700s, during the colonial period. But I often refer to this in some of the videos about the Iroquois being among the most advanced peoples socially in the Americas, and so much so that it just shows a high level of intelligence, a high level of organization, and how it relates to the stone walls of New York and New England and the northeastern part of North America. Here I'm showing part of New Hampshire here. And, where these stone walls, I keep on saying that whoever preceded the Iroquois in these areas, okay, and the confederation of tribes there, constructed these stone walls, and it's just a gigantic, absolutely gigantic settlement area of these peoples who built these stone walls. And it's my opinion it was these large hominids or large humanoids that built these walls, and it's also Jim Vieira's opinion as well. I mean, he came to that conclusion on his own. I came to my conclusion on my own. And among other things that I discovered while doing research in the Green Mountains there in Connecticut and Vermont, okay, which you can see in my videos, okay, we determined that the stone walls were all serpent walls, a repeating theme of the serpent effigy in the wall with the eye in the wall. I show many examples of it, including people who, emailed me pictures of their areas there in the mountainous areas there. So the Iroquois Confederation really reflects some sort of, echo of this civilization in that its organization and had to be that way because of the way these people lived. And it was certainly a larger population, as we found out in Charles C. Mann's book, 1491, New Revelations of the Americas before Columbus. Okay, there's just millions of people living here and formed all these stone walls. It's just unbelievable. And this is Vermont over here, and it's, if we could just see it also in Vermont, it would look identical to this. That's still New Hampshire there, but it's divided by the Connecticut River, which is somewhere to the left here. But these people, these large hominids, probably built these stone walls and passed on their traditions to the Iroquois. And I'll discuss some of the reasons why I think the Iroquois were the descendants of the Hopewell. I believe they're either directly related to the Hopewell or descendants of the Hopewell, and they carry this stuff with them from when they lived in the civilization with the Adena, who seemed to be very advanced peoples and, had this social dynamic going on between giants and normal sized people apparently in the past. And the Iroquois evidently come from the Algonquin peoples, so the Algonquin peoples, especially along the coastal areas and including on Long Island, had apparently integrated with the giants because of the giant chieftains and their stories about the good giants that you never heard about, which you hear about on this channel. You only hear about bad giants, right? But you hear about good giants in mythology and folklore on my channel, because they just ignore those and concentrate on these other ones. Okay, all sorts of propaganda going on with the giants, but let's take a look at this great law of peace and the great peacemaker and where he might have come from. Could it be that the great peacemaker was one of these, big men, or like the Bible and the people who study history say, men of renown, which this seems to be a story similar to that. And we're going to take a look at it, the great law of peace. This is very interesting, and all the other things that may surround the possibility that the Iroquois and the Iroquois speaking or related people are also the descendants of the Hopewell. It certainly seems to be. Now, I go over on my channel here, and you can see these videos I include on my channel uploaded from Cornell University. This lady professor here from Cornell University specializes in the native peoples of New York here, which is the Iroquois, and she's a Tuscarora native lady. So she's actually a native person and a professor there. And she says that it's possible that the Iroquois came from the Ohio Valley. Okay, whereas in the Wikipedia article here, they say that they migrated the from Canada around the Great Lakes area. Okay, so it's quite possible because all these places covered those areas. If you want to consider where the Hopewell existed, okay, so here's the areas where you find the Iroquois peoples. Okay, down here the Cherokee, who are also Iroquois and related speaking people. Okay, Cherokee language, member of the Iroquoian family spoken by the Cherokee, inhabiting Virginia, West Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Kentucky, and Tennessee. Okay, Iroquois speaking peoples, okay, and many other Iroquois speaking peoples, but seem to be enemies possibly of the Iroquois Confederation. So we're going to read about all of these things in the Great Law of Peace and the Great Peacemaker and who he might have been. Okay. And just think about the possibility that exists that the Iroquois are actually the Hopewell, formed a confederation after the giants. Something happened to the giants. It seemed that around somewhere between 1100 AD and 1300 AD, some things were happening here. We heard in Charles C. Mann's book, okay, 1491, there was great catastrophes and cataclysms going on up and down the east coast of the Americas at that time. So what were these things going on, and did that, was that partially responsible? Did something happen and the Hopewell peoples held the giants responsible? Were the Hopewell and the Adena living in like city states, and some city states were at war with other city states? I mean, all these possibilities exist. I mean, if you can use your imagination and you're thinking about it in those terms, well, certainly we have to consider it, because the archaeology and anthropology from Indiana, pretty much is pretty definite in their thinking when they're saying that the Hopewell and the Adena were contemporaries, okay? And it's this sort of blank spot in history between the Adena and Hopewell culture, and then the appearance of the Indians, native peoples of the Americas in these areas. I mean, even in the Iroquois tradition, they talk about their migration from somewhere else. It's part of, and their laws. They have the Great Law of Peace. They speak about their history and these laws, and you'll be surprised to hear how sophisticated it is. But let's read a couple of things here that are just of interest to me. When we go back to the Hopewell, okay, and just read this again because I want to instill in the viewers this, this thing that was going on with the Hopewell that seemed a bit more than just a few, native peoples making baskets or something like that. This was a big thing that was going on. It required a great deal of organization, hierarchy, security. All of these things come into play when you talk about societies as advanced and developed as this. Okay, so let me just read the first part of it. I can't read everything to you. Obviously, it just take too long, but certainly look at it yourselves when you get a chance. The Hopewell tradition, also called the Hopewell culture, describes the common aspects of the Native American culture that flourished along the rivers in the northeastern and midwestern eastern woodlands from 100 BC to 500 CE in the Middle Woodland period. The Hopewell tradition was not a single culture or society, but a widely dispersed set of related populations. They were connected by a common network of trade routes known as the Hopewell exchange system. At its greatest extent, the Hopewell exchange system ran from the Crystal River Indian Mountains in modern-day Florida as far north as the northern shores of Lake Ontario. Within this area, societies participated in a high degree of exchange with the highest amount of activity along waterways. The Hopewell exchange system received materials from all over what is now occupied by the United States. Most of the items traded were exotic materials and were received by people living in the major trading and manufacturing areas. These people then converted the materials into products and exported them through local and regional exchange networks. So it's a little bit more complicated than you think. It shows a high level of organization and activity, and I am saying that this is what the walls, all the stone walls in the northeast, is reflected by these pink areas on this map here, are showing. It also reflects an even higher level going into a further, more ancient past. Okay, but similar in function, especially the enigmatic areas of the walls that are closed in and have no openings. Okay, so this is inexplicable why you would build a walled in area with no opening in it unless that was to say something. Okay, and in my opinion, it says authorized personnel only. Although the origins of the Hopewell are still under discussion, the Hopewell culture can also be considered a cultural climax. Hopewell populations originated in western New York and moved south into Ohio, where they built upon the local Adena mortuary tradition. While Hopewell was said to have originated in western Illinois and spread by diffusion to southern Ohio. Similarly, the Havana Hopewell tradition was thought to have spread up the Illinois River and into southwestern Michigan, spawning Goodall Hopewell. The name Hopewell was okay, so I'm not going to read into that, but talking about the politics and hierarchy, I thought this video would be appropriate, and with all the politics going on right now as well. The Hopewell inherited from their Adena forebears an incipient social stratification. I started to go into this in one of my previous videos, but we know now from current archaeology and anthropology that there is no separation of the Adena and the Hopewell. There are no Adena forebears unless you're talking about the ones that were eliminated somewhere in there in the history that we don't know about and what happened to these people. And it seems to be that was whoever was left of the Hopewell went to these northeastern area there, and by migration, admittedly through their traditions and whatnot. This increased social stability and reinforced sedentism, social stratification, specialized use of resources, and probably population growth. Hopewell societies cremated buried most of their deceased and reserved burial for only the most important people. In some sites, hunters apparently received a higher status in the community because their graves were more elaborate and contained more status goods. The Hopewellian peoples had leaders, but they were not like powerful rulers who could command armies of slaves and soldiers. These cultures likely accorded certain families a special place of privilege. Some scholars suggest that these societies were marked by the emergence of quote unquote big men, okay? Big men, a highly influential individual in a tribe, especially in Malaysia and Polynesia, but they're saying this with these people in the Hopewell. So these big men, are they literally big men? I think that's what they're referring to, and that's who the great peacemaker is, by the way, okay, in the Iroquois culture, okay, referred back to some time in the past that they are unsure of. These leaders acquired their position because of their ability to persuade others to agree with them on important matters such as trade and religion. They also perhaps were able to develop influence by the creation of reciprocal obligations with other important members of the community. Whatever the source of their status and power, the emergence of quote unquote big men was another step toward the development of the highly structured and stratified socio-political organization called the chiefdom. The Hopewell settlements were linked by extensive and complex trading routes, which doubled as communication networks, bring people together for important ceremonies, among other things. See, so it's many uses for those things: communication workers and trade routes. Okay, all in one. Okay, so and I'm not going through all this stuff with the Hopewell, but you can see all of these cultures that they consider the Hopewell. You can read through all of these in these different areas. Well, these are the places where you're going to find Iroquois speaking people like the Cherokee. Okay, this is where they're from. Okay, and so you have these Iroquois speaking people, and like this lady says, they may have migrated from the Ohio Valley area and the Indiana, Illinois area over to the New York area. These confederation of tribes may have been the ones that were loyal to the Adena, and there may have been a war. There may have been an insurgency. Maybe people didn't want to be ruled by the giants anymore. Maybe they were free-thinking people. Other tribes outside, also Iroquois speaking, but maybe we're not really talking about Iroquois speaking. First of all, they're not the Iroquois. That's a French made-up name, okay, for them. That's not their real name. Their real name is the Haudenosaunee. So the Haudenosaunee, okay, as this lady pronounces them correctly because she's Tuscaroran. Okay, so let's read a little bit down here. So you can see all these different areas of the United States where these people occupy. We're talking about people who probably spoke the same language, etc., etc. Okay, so it just so happens that the Iroquois language is in all of these areas, including up through all these areas where the mounds are and everything else, including the stone walls as well. Okay, so it says the cultural decline. Listen to what it says here. Around 500 CE, the Hopewell Exchange ceased, mound building stopped, and art forms were no longer produced. War is a possible cause. As villages dating to the late woodland period shifted to larger communities, they built defensive fortifications of palisade walls and ditches. I don't think they're getting that correct. I think that they're mistaking some of these things as the medium security trading areas, and they don't know what the real story is. Colder climatic conditions could have also driven game animals north or west, as weather would have a detrimental effect on plant life. Something was going on back then. You can read about these cataclysms that they were having at the time, okay, from Charles C. Mann's book, all right, and other things going on. Not shortly after that the coldest decade in 500 years happened in the early 1800s, and then the summer, the year without a summer occurred in the early 1800s as well. So Okay, so they don't know the climatic conditions due to what? The introduction of the bow and arrow by improving hunts may have caused stress on already depleted food populations. And I say many, many times that these people were not dependent on the game animals around them. They could overhunt their area in a second and probably were. You look at the density of these walled-in areas in New Hampshire here, for example, there probably were no game animals around at all. Okay, the thing is you're getting your food from either plant material and the bounty of the sea, because as many times as you can throw your net into the water at certain times of the year, you're going to pull out fish. As many times as you throw your net into the water, the sea is so bountiful. Okay, but you could overhunt your area in like no time flat, and there'd be no game animals at all anymore. Similar to how we're living today, and especially the larger game animals not around. Okay, so maybe all of these reasons, maybe none of these reasons really, and maybe more of a cataclysmic reason. Okay. It may have led people to live in larger, more permanent communities for protection as warfare became more deadly. With fewer people using trade routes, there was no longer a network linking people to the Hopewell traditions. The breakdown in societal organization could have also been the result of full scale agriculture. Conclusive reasons for the evident dispersal of the people have not yet been determined. You can see that right there, not yet been determined. Okay, so we're trying to determine here on this channel by linking some things together that seem to be, relevant to what I'm saying here about the Iroquois and the Iroquois speaking people being the Hopewell. What was left of them after the giants disappeared, were killed off, whatever was going on, some internecine type thing or insurgency, possibly outer tribes or whatever. So let's read a little bit about the Iroquois. The Iroquois, or Haudenosaunee, people of the Longhouse, are a historical indigenous confederacy in northeast North America. They were known during the colonial years to the French as the Iroquois League, later as the Iroquois Confederacy, and to the English as the Five Nations, comprising the Mohawk, Onondaga, Oneida, Cayuga, and Seneca. After 1722, they accepted the Tuscarora people from the southeast into their confederacy, as they were also Iroquois speaking, consequently became known as the Six Nations. The Iroquois have absorbed many other individuals from various peoples into their tribes as a result of warfare, adoption of captives, and by offering shelter to displaced peoples. Culturally, all are considered members of the clans and tribes into which they are adopted by families. The historic St. Lawrence Iroquois, Wyandot, Huron, Erie, and Susquehannock, all independent peoples, also spoke Iroquois languages. In the largest sense of linguistic families, they are often considered Iroquois peoples because of their similar languages and cultures, all descended from the Proto-Iroquois people and language. Who were these Proto-Iroquois people? I stated they were all the Hopewell. Politically, however, they were traditional enemies of the Iroquois League. In addition, Cherokee is an Iroquois language. The Cherokee people are believed to have migrated south from the Great Lakes in ancient times, settling in the backcountry of the southeast United States, including what is now Tennessee, Georgia, and North Carolina. In 2010, more than 45,000 enrolled Six Nation peoples lived in Canada and about 80,000 in the United States. There's much, much greater numbers here in the past, as we know from Charles C. Vance Buck. Okay, so they're talking about the names here, and they talk about the Iroquois Confederacy here, and the Iroquois Confederacy, or Haudenosaunee, is believed to have been founded by the Peacemaker, or the Great Peacemaker, at an unknown date, estimated to have been sometime between 1450 and 1660, bringing together five distinct nations in the southern Great Lakes area into the Great League of Peace. Each nation within its Iroquois Confederacy had a distinct language, territory, and function in the League. Iroquois power at its peak extended into present-day Canada, westward along the Great Lakes and down both sides of the Allegheny Mountains into present-day Virginia, Kentucky, and into the Ohio Valley. Okay, so here's all the places that they were. Just so happens that these are the places that the Hopewell, the average sized people, occupied among the Adena people. Okay, and he also said that the Hopewell people were dolichocephalic. Okay, so they were long-headed people as opposed to the Adena who were brachiocephalic and with these high craniums. Okay, so and then they all of the giants sort of interbred and created all sorts of hybrids in the past. And they're talking about all these wars among the people. See, I'm not going to read all about the Iroquois. It's not necessary, but um, I don't think there was anything I wanted to say about this. With the food production, it's just that the women, it was a matriarchal society, matriarchal society there, where the women actually did most of the agriculture. But let's talk about the Great Law of Peace and the great peacemaker and who he might have been. Among the Haudenosaunee, six nations comprising Mohawk, Onondaga, Oneida, Cayuga, Seneca, and Tuscarora peoples, the Great Law of Peace is the oral constitution of the Iroquois Confederacy. The law was written on wampum belts conceived by Decanawida, known as the Great Peacemaker, and his spokesman, Hiawatha. The original five-member nations ratified this constitution near modern-day Victor, New York, with the Six Nations, Tuscarora, being added in 1722. The laws were first recorded and transmitted not in a written language but by means of wampum symbols that conveyed meaning. In a later era, it was translated into English, and various other accounts exist. The Great Law of Peace is presented as part of a narrative noting laws and ceremonies to be performed at prescribed times. The laws, called a constitution, are divided into 117 articles. The United Iroquois nations are symbolized by an eastern white pine tree called the Tree of Peace. Each nation or tribe plays a delineated role in the conduct of government. Attempts to date the founding of the Iroquois Confederacy have focused on a reported solar eclipse, which many scholars identify as the one occurred in 1451 AD, though some debate exists with support for 1190, which is closer to these times when these great catastrophes happened here in the Americas and many, many peoples disappeared, including the peoples down there, the Hohokam peoples there down in Arizona. The narrative of the Great Law exists in the languages of the member nations, so spelling and usages vary. William N. Fenton observed that it came to serve a purpose as a social organization inside and among the nations, a constitution of the Iroquois Confederacy or League, ceremonies to be observed, and binding history of peoples. Fenton also observed some 9 common points, focusing more simply on a narrative storyline, though Christopher Vesey identified 22 points shared across some 2 dozen versions of the narrative or parts of the narrative, both direct and indirect. Okay, so here's the narrative. One, the migration and separation of the people, prehistory of the area. Okay, so this migration and separation of the people could be all these Hopewell peoples who were left without their leaders. The Adena were either killed off or died off as a result of cataclysms, catastrophes, famine, whatever it might have been. Okay, we can only speculate on those things. Internal fighting, city states fighting each other, insurgencies, whatever it might be, rebellion against them. Then maybe the Hopewell didn't want to be ruled by them anymore, killed them off. We don't know. It seems that it strongly suggests that the giants were killed off for any reason whatsoever, including being cannibals. Although it says right here in these in this narrative here about the cannibal converts. And number 5 there, the birth and growth of Diganawida, the journey of the Mohawks, the situation and the mission explained. The mother of nations accepts Diganawida's message. The cannibal converts. So these people are these native peoples who are cannibals, not the giants, native peoples, but even if they were the Hopewell people, just people of our size, like our size or whatever, maybe they were the real cannibals. And it's a pejorative to call anybody cannibal, and that's just a common theme among Native American people. It's calling these other people cannibals or whatever, just simple demonization of the enemy. The prophets prove their power. Tadadaho, the wizard, prevents peace. Hiawatha's relatives are killed. Hiawatha mourns and quits Onondaga. Hiawatha invents wampum. Hiawatha gives the Mohawks lessons in protocol. Daganawida consoles Hiawatha. Scouts travel to Tadaho. Daganawida and Hiawatha join Oneidas, Cayugas, and Senecas to Mohawks. The nations march to Tadadaho, singing the peace hymn. Daganawida and Hiawatha transform Tadadaho. Constitution and Confederacy and social order of the member fields. You see how complex it is, but you're going to see how even more so in a minute. Constitution and Confederacy is social order of the member peoples. Daganawida and Hiawatha establish Iroquois unity and law. Daganawida and Hiawatha establish league chiefs and council polity. The Confederacy takes symbolic images. The League declares its sovereignty. The constitutional laws of the Confederacy. Ceremony. The condolence maintains of the Confederacy. A sequence of ceremonies for grieving over a deceased chief and appointing a new one. Daganawida departs. Barbara Mann has gathered versions featuring conflicting but harmonized elements. Who does what varies, what happens is more consistent than not, or stories that tell distinct elements not shared in other versions into a narrative she includes in the Encyclopedia of the Haudenosaunee, published in 2000. So there's all these sort of different accounts of what something that happened in a far ancient past, probably when these people were the Hopewell, running away from whatever was happening there in the Ohio Valley. And it may have been war with other Hopewellian sects from different areas, okay, after the Giants disappeared or there was a rebellion against them or whatever. And it seems to me that if that's the case, it's possible that the Iroquois were the ones that were loyal to the Adena, and these other Iroquois-speaking tribes were the Hopewellians that were not, or rebelling against them, or created some sort of internecine political element, possibly. This is the kind of things that go on with complex societies like this. Invariably, is going to go on when you have this social stratification of the sort of haves and have-nots, whatever it is. So here it just talks about the published accounts where the stories differ between these tribes who are all Iroquois speaking. But listen to this. Influence on the United States Constitution. Some historians, including Donald Grind of the University of Buffalo, the State University of New York, have claimed that the democratic ideals of the Guyana Shagawa provided a significant inspiration to Benjamin Franklin, James Madison, and other framers of the U.S. Constitution. They contend that the federal structure of the U.S. Constitution was influenced by the living example of the Iroquois Confederation, as were notions of individual liberty and the separation of powers. Grind, Buse, Johansson, and others also identify Native American symbols and imagery that were adopted by the nascent United States, including the American bald eagle and bundle of arrows. Their thesis argues the U.S. Constitution was the synthesis of various forms of political organization familiar to the founders, including the Iroquois Confederation. Franklin circulated copies of the proceedings of the 1744 Treaty of Lancaster among his fellow colonists. At the close of this document, the Six Nations leaders offered to impart instruction in their democratic methods of government to the English. Franklin's Albany plan is also believed to have been influenced by his understanding of Iroquois government. John Rutledge of South Carolina, delegate to the Constitutional Convention, is said to have read lengthy tracts of Six Nations law to other framers framers, beginning with the words, "We, the people, to form a union to establish peace, equity, and order." In October 1988, the U.S. Congress passed a concurrent Resolution 331 to recognize the influence of the Iroquois Constitution upon the American Constitution and Bill of Rights. So I'm not going to read into it anymore, but just to show you how highly complex the Iroquois social organization was, okay, it seems to be influenced into the America's highest laws. Okay, so where did they get this from? And I'm saying they got it from the Adena and Hopewell cultures, who seemed pretty advanced for their time in many ways in astronomy, mathematics, art, and other things. So construction techniques, this trading network and exchange system, where goods were manufactured on, large scale, and all these other things. So all these things have to be considered. And the fact that the Iroquois people speak their Iroquois language and the Cherokee occupy all these areas where it's seen that the Hopewell, Adena and Hopewell culture were at the time, okay, except for where they migrated to. They say they migrated from the Ohio Valley or up from the Appalachians or wherever it was, but out of from these areas, okay. Maybe the Iroquois were running from the other hostile Hopewellians, okay, because they had this split in their society at some point, maybe in the past. And this is where some of the giant genocides come from in the past, where the giants ruled over normal sized people. These people invariably were going to, some of them were not going to like that and were going to rebel, possibly, okay? Or the Hopewell and Adena's city states warred against each other for whatever reasons, we have to consider these things. And this is what fill these blank areas between where they say the Hopewellian culture ended around 500 CE. Well, what happened after that, between that and when the native peoples suddenly occupied these areas, okay? Or maybe they never left, and that's who the Cherokee and Iroquois speaking peoples are that are still in those areas, and that some of them moved up into the New York and Canadian areas there. And certainly you see more organization going on with the walls of New England, like this giant, vast civilization. What was going on here? You can see these clusters of walls just don't make any sense in a colonial sense at all. What was going on here? Every state looks like this. It's just incredible, just incredible. Okay, here's the Connecticut River, and here's Vermont. Well, these are where the Iroquois people and the Iroquois people in the Iroquois League were, in these mountainous regions where there's very few arable areas to grow crops. They had to get their food. It's high level of organization among the Iroquois, and their high level of social structure in their society was passed on to them through the great Peacemaker. Well, who is he? Okay, and maybe this great digging a weed at a great Peacemaker, okay, was one of these Adena from the past. Okay, one of these big men, as they say. The great Peacemaker name means two river currents flowing together. Okay, so his mother was a virgin, making the birth miraculous. Have you heard that before? Okay, so what are they saying here in reality? Okay, how far back does this go into great antiquity? Well, perhaps when the Adena and Hopewell there, and Hopewell never left. And that's who the Iroquois are and who the Cherokee are. And the great Peacemaker was one of these large hominids from the past, or what they refer to as one of these big men. Okay, I'm just telling you, okay, the big men. Okay, we saw the chiefs of the Fiji Islands who are 7 feet tall, 7 foot, 7 foot, 7 inch tall people who look like they could bend steel girders in half, not suffering from gigantism or acromegaly, just incredibly huge individuals in their unbroken things. We're talking about Melanesia and Polynesia, okay? Big men, okay? He was a big man, the great Peacemaker. Well, I bet you he was an Adena giant, okay? And they carried this over. The Iroquois were loyal to the Adena, and these other Iroquois speaking tribes may have been the Hopewell. There may have been an internal political conflict going on in a large society like this, okay? Covers these vast areas and trading network, and that means power, prestige, and money, etc. We all know what kind of dynamics are involved here, okay? So these just happen to be the exact places where the Iroquois are and the Cherokee people are, okay? So let's get with the program, people. Maybe we can fill in some of the gaps here and talk about where these people actually came from, okay? And I'm saying that it seems highly probable that the Iroquois are the Hopewell and what we know to be the Hopewell, okay? And something went on in the past, maybe some great catastrophe, and they were held responsible for the bad things that occurred. They migrated from the area. There was an internal conflict going on. The giants were all killed off, okay, for whatever reasons, and all the propaganda that goes along with political things, okay? So think about it, guys. That's all I'm saying. Consider these things. Here's a picture of the old stone fort in Tennessee, one of these trading areas. These construction elements here are for security purposes and all part of this Hopewell exchange and interaction sphere, which covered a vast area, okay? And maybe who we're talking about, the Iroquois, people that we're talking about are actually the Hopewell and the descendants of the Hopewell, okay? All right, guys. Well, anyway, I hope you consider these possibilities because I think they're highly likely that these things are correct. And consider it about these stone walls as well, okay? The stone walls in and of themselves show a high level of organization and what were being done with these stone walls and how these things are constructed and everything covered this vast area. Just incredible, okay? And people were obviously living among these things. And what were they doing with them? Okay, something purposeful, you see. So, anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed that. Please hit the like button if you liked the video, and please do subscribe if you're not a subscriber. We cover many different kinds of topics and ideas on the channel that you never heard before anywhere. All right, guys, anyway, see you real soon for another video on the Giants International, unless we're going to mainland Europe, I believe, and there's some very interesting stories we can tell from there. All right. Anyway, guys, Buckcat7 signing out. Peace.